but it's this kind of frozen place with strange eruptions from the surface that kind of rise up into space but then go flat.
Brian Cox just confirmed that something huge and unnatural was hiding behind the moon for decades, and NASA's own live feed accidentally showed it to the world. Scientists found proof that the structure followed patterns like the Fibonacci spiral and prime numbers, almost like a hidden message carved into the moon itself. The truth spread so fast that even confidential military groups started making emergency plans. Tune in, because the terrifying part isn't just what we found, it's what just left the moon and vanished into the stars. The silent warning hidden in plain sight. When NASA launched its latest live moon feed, the goal was simple: routine observation. But what the James Webb Space Telescope caught lurking behind the moon was anything but routine. Mid-infrared imaging revealed a vast angular structure hidden in complete darkness, radiating an anomalous heat signature unlike anything ever recorded. Scientists at both NASA and the European Space Agency confirmed it within minutes. A formation spanning between 2 and 4 miles, carved with straight lines and sharp angles no natural geological process could explain. Before we dig deeper, it becomes clear that what lies hidden behind the moon is far more disturbing than anyone dared to imagine. And what comes next will shake our understanding of reality even more. It was not a trick. It was not an illusion. It was a message written in the silence of space. Dr. Elena Martinez from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center used dual parallax observation to verify the dimensions, and her findings were chilling. The structure's thermal profile suggested materials that absorbed and retained heat far differently than the lunar regolith around it. Metals, exotic minerals, whatever it was, it should not have been there. Even radar echoes from earlier missions like Clementine and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter hinted at anomalies in this same location. But until Webb's unprecedented sensitivity, there was no way to see it clearly. Now, there was no hiding. The far side of the moon, long thought to be a barren graveyard of craters and frozen lava plains, had revealed something that rewrote history. When images hit NASA's secure channels, the panic was immediate. Engineers ran frantic double checks, combing through every pixel for signs of processing errors or equipment glitches. Nothing. The data was pure, the structure was real, and the deeper the scientists dug, the more questions exploded. Brian Cox, one of the most respected voices in modern astrophysics, had been quietly watching from the sidelines. Known for his rational, measured explanations of the universe, Cox was not one to chase sensationalism. But when he finally spoke out, his message was terrifyingly clear. This changes everything. The internet erupted, forums flooded, news outlets scrambled for experts who could explain what NASA's own livestream could not. How had something this massive stayed hidden for decades? How had countless missions mapped and studied the moon without ever seeing it? Or had they seen it and chosen to keep it hidden? Because what Webb found was not just strange, it was impossible. Mid-infrared wavelengths showed the structure bleeding thermal radiation in a way no mountain, crater, or boulder could. Its symmetrical edges and angular construction defied natural processes. This was not erosion. It was not meteor impact, it was something else. Theories raced faster than the speed of light. Some suggested it was a massive concentration of exotic metals, hidden beneath layers of lunar dust until seismic activity exposed it. Others claimed it could be a remnant of an ancient lunar civilization, perhaps predating humanity itself. The most radical voices whispered the unthinkable: extraterrestrial architecture, hidden from Earth's view for millennia, now uncovered by accident. But before we dive into those possibilities, it is crucial to understand why this discovery sent waves of terror through the scientific elite. First, the moon is the most studied celestial body besides Earth. We have mapped every crack and crater. We have walked its surface. We have built maps using radar, laser altimetry, and direct imaging. The idea that something between 2 and 4 miles wide had been hiding there, in total darkness, mocks the very foundation of space exploration. Second, the timing. Webb's mission was not even supposed to focus on the moon. It was meant to calibrate instruments, using the moon's stable infrared reflection as a background reference before turning its gaze to the deep cosmos. The moon was merely a stepping stone, a quick pit stop, and yet, it became ground zero for the most shocking discovery since the dawn of the space age. Third, The heat. The structure emitted a thermal signature during the dead cold of lunar night, when surrounding areas should have been freezing. No natural rock formation retains that kind of heat, and when cross-referenced against old Soviet Luna mission archives, faint echoes of the same anomaly appeared. Luna 19 in the 1970s? A fleeting thermal shadow in the same coordinates. It was dismissed at the time as a glitch, but it was no glitch. It was a warning sign. Brian Cox's warning resonated louder than any conspiracy theory. If the structure was artificial, if it was built, not formed, then the implications were staggering. Humanity was no longer alone on the lunar frontier. Someone, or something, had been there before us, and they had left something behind. Before we even entertain the possibilities, we need to pull back and confront the hardest truth of all: theories that shouldn't exist but do. Now that the structure's existence could no longer be denied, the world of science split into two camps: those desperately clinging to known physics, and those willing to dive headfirst into the unknown. Brian Cox made it clear: whatever this was, it did not fit comfortably within current models. And if the past few years have taught us anything, it is that reality does not care about our comfort. The first major theory to explode into the conversation was that of an ancient extraterrestrial megastructure. For decades, science fiction authors like Arthur C. Clarke speculated that if intelligent life existed, it would leave behind monuments, silent watchers tucked away on nearby celestial bodies. Now, real scientists were considering that possibility in earnest. The symmetry of the thermal pattern, the sharp edges, the unusual heat retention, everything pointed to construction, not coincidence. The second theory came from a far less romantic place: hidden human technology. Conspiracy theorists, and increasingly, some respected aerospace engineers, floated the idea that during the Cold War, confidential lunar missions might have established hidden outposts. Declassified documents from projects like Project Horizon hinted at military plans to establish manned bases on the moon by the early 1960s. Suppose one of these plans, quietly buried under classified budgets and plausible deniability, had actually succeeded. The far side of the moon, permanently shielded from Earth's view, would be the perfect place for clandestine construction. No prying telescopes, no international oversight, just a blank, cold canvas on which to build whatever confidential projects the military-industrial complex desired. Skeptics pointed out the massive logistical challenges of such a feat, the payload requirements, the cost, the lack of public evidence, but supporters of the theory countered: secrecy is expensive, and governments have paid far higher costs for far less ambitious goals. Adding fuel to the fire, amateur researchers quickly unearthed old Soviet Luna mission data. Buried deep in dusty archives was a cryptic thermal glitch recorded in 1974 at precisely the same coordinates as Webb's new images. Soviet engineers dismissed it as a sensor malfunction at the time. Now it was being reinterpreted as the earliest clue that something unnatural had been lurking on the far side of the moon for over half a century. Some quantum physicists began whispering about dimensional overlap. According to this radical idea, the moon could act as a gravitational lens, not just for light, but for the very fabric of space-time itself. Under rare conditions, it might create a temporary window into higher dimensions, allowing structures from alternate realities to bleed into ours. In this theory, what Webb captured was not a building or an artifact at all. It was a shadow, a projection from another dimension brushing against our own. Nobel laureate Dr. Nadine Joe had already laid the groundwork for this concept years ago. She proposed that ultra-high-energy cosmic rays could create localized fractures between branes, the three-dimensional membranes our universe floats within, according to string theory. If that happened, distortions would not look like glowing portals or wormholes. They would look like strange heat signatures, impossible geometry, and sudden patterns that should not exist. Brian Cox, after analyzing the Webb data himself, warned that the structure's existence could signal the greatest paradigm shift in modern science. If we confirmed it was artificial, humanity would be forced to confront the reality that we are not the first, nor the only builders in our cosmic backyard. If it was natural, it meant forces and materials existed beyond our current geological models, waiting to be discovered. Either way, our maps, our history, and our understanding of the moon had just been turned upside down. The world now found itself standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss of possibilities. And it was about to get even stranger, because buried deep within the latest imaging data, researchers found something else, something far more disturbing than a mere structure. A pattern, a recurring deliberate geometry, a cosmic message carved into the dark side of the moon, waiting for us to notice, and it looked horrifyingly familiar. The code etched in lunar silence. As the world scrambled to process the enormity of the structure itself, a handful of cryptographers and physicists quietly began studying the finer details. The heat signature captured by Webb's instruments was not random. It was not a natural blot of warmth smeared across rock and dust. It was precise, intentional, mathematical. When the data was enhanced, filtering out background noise and compensating for thermal drift, an unmistakable pattern emerged. The structure's radiating heat revealed a spiral, not just any spiral, but one following the Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical pattern found in everything from galaxies to seashells to the spiraling arms of hurricanes. And it did not stop there. Overlay analysis revealed that lattice points, tiny nodes scattered across the formation, aligned almost perfectly to prime numbers spaced with unnerving regularity. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23. The prime progression marched outward like an invisible framework stitched into the very rock of the moon. At first, skeptics cried coincidence, but the deeper the analysis went, the worse the odds became. According to statistical modeling from the Space Telescope Science Institute, the chance of natural lunar geology randomly producing both a perfect Fibonacci spiral and a prime number grid was less than 1 in 10 to the 24th power. That is the same probability as winning the global lottery 17 times in a row. In other words, impossible. Someone or something had deliberately embedded a mathematical message onto the far side of the moon, and we had just cracked the first layer. Professor Amina Patel at MIT's Center for Astrophysical Cryptology was among the first to take the discovery seriously. Her team, applying matrix algebra, frequency analysis, and entropy mapping, treated the lunar formation like a cipher, a locked code waiting for a key. If you want to send a message across civilizations, across languages, across even species, Patel explained, you use mathematics. Constants like primes and Fibonacci are universal. They transcend culture, biology, even planetary origin. In short, this was communication. But what was it saying? Early interpretations suggested a layered message, a fractal construction where motifs nested within motifs, hinting at recursion and self-similarity, two concepts fundamental not just to mathematics, but to life and computation themselves. It was not a static picture. It was an evolving problem, a message designed to unfold over time as observers grew more capable of understanding complexity. The implications were staggering. Was this structure an ancient library of knowledge? A warning system designed to survive millennia? Or something far stranger, an interstellar breadcrumb trail left behind by builders we had yet to meet? Speculation exploded. Forums, research papers, and even private corporations began to dive headfirst into the data. Quantum AI models were trained to detect deeper patterns hidden within the thermal echoes. Theorists proposed that the pattern might be a map, not of the moon, but of a place far beyond our solar system. Or worse, a countdown. Because tucked into the heat signatures were small variations, repeating at regular intervals like pulses. Not random noise, but timed rhythms, beats like a heart or a ticking clock. And if early models were correct, the countdown was not measured in centuries. It was much shorter, and it was already ticking. Brian Cox, ever the voice of cautious reason, urged the public not to leap to apocalyptic conclusions. Yet even he admitted, reluctantly, that the structure's design implied intent, intelligence, planning, and time. Whatever built it had understood the fundamental language of the cosmos, had etched it into cold, silent stone as a beacon or a bomb, and humanity had just stumbled into its line of sight. Meanwhile, the anomalies continued to pile up. Archived data from Soviet Luna missions showed unexplained gravitational distortions near the formation's location, tiny fluctuations in local gravity fields, too small to notice without precise instruments, but consistent across multiple missions. Japan's Selene mission detected anomalous radio reflections, bouncing strangely off the region's subsurface as if it concealed hollow cavities beneath the visible rock. And the James Webb Space Telescope? It picked up something else entirely, a second, smaller structure. Roughly 1,000 feet away from the main formation, another anomalous heat signature shimmered in the dark. Smaller, colder, but geometrically similar, like a satellite node or an access point. This was no isolated phenomenon. It was part of a network, or worse, a machine. The awakening we never meant to trigger. When the structure's countdown-like pulses were first detected, researchers dismissed it as an observational error. Webb's instruments were sensitive after all, far beyond anything humanity had used before. Anomalies were expected, glitches were expected, but these were no glitches. Independent analysis from the European Southern Observatory confirmed the terrifying truth. The pulses were consistent, measurable, and increasing. They were not background noise, they were signals, and their frequency was rising. Every week, the energy fluctuations in the structure's thermal profile grew sharper, more defined, as if some internal system, long dormant, was slowly stirring. Scientists were no longer asking what the structure was. They were asking how much time we had left before it fully woke up. NASA immediately shut down public feeds related to the Webb moon observations, citing calibration inconsistencies. The European Space Agency went silent. Private telescope networks trying to capture infrared images of the lunar far side reported sudden equipment malfunctions, unexplained signal dropouts, and bizarre power surges. In the vacuum of information, speculation metastasized into dread. Brian Cox, breaking his characteristic calm once more, warned that humanity had crossed an event horizon of understanding. We could no longer ignore the implications. Something had been left behind on the moon, not abandoned, but hidden, preserved, possibly programmed to respond to specific triggers. And now, Webb's imaging systems, unintentionally or not, had supplied that trigger. As researchers scrambled to decode the next layer of patterns embedded in the Fibonacci spiral and prime lattice, a secondary discovery sent shockwaves through the community. At the core of the spiral, buried within millimeter variations in the thermal contour, was another sequence. Not a number sequence this time, but a harmonic resonance. When converted into audible frequencies, it produced a sustained chord eerily close to a perfect fifth, a musical interval considered by many cultures to represent stability, balance, and the gateway between worlds. Some theorists suggested the structure was broadcasting a greeting to the stars, meant for any intelligence advanced enough to uncover and interpret it. A kind of cosmic handshake, a sign that life had once touched the moon and might one day return. Across classified briefings and closed-door meetings, panic set in. Defense agencies worldwide began quietly coordinating lunar observation protocols. Plans for new lunar reconnaissance missions accelerated overnight. Emergency funding flooded into deep space listening posts. Old Cold War fears of extraterrestrial threats, once relegated to the dustbin of fringe paranoia, resurfaced with brutal urgency. Meanwhile, amateur astronomers, unaware of the classified discoveries, began reporting strange flashes and anomalous reflections from the moon's far side, bright, brief points of light that seemed to dance along the edge of visibility before vanishing. No one could explain them. And then came the final blow. Just weeks after Webb's discovery, during a routine deep space calibration, the telescope recorded a moving object, a small, high-speed thermal signature departing the region near the structure. Not debris, not a glitch. An object. It moved without any trouble, lifting off the moon in a wide, graceful curve. Slowly, it climbed higher and higher, leaving the gray surface behind and sailing into the cold, endless dark, beyond where the moon circles Earth. It did not look like anything we had ever seen before. No spacecraft, no satellite, no probe had a pattern like this. No country had announced a launch. No scientist could explain it as a weather event or a space rock. Something had risen from the moon itself. Something had been there, silent and unseen, maybe for a very long time. And now, for reasons we could not understand, it had decided to leave. Within only a few short months, everything we believed about space had been shaken to its core. People once thought of the moon as just a cold, empty rock, lifeless and unchanging. Now, it seemed more like a giant locked box, and somehow, that box had been forced open. We were no longer staring up at a dead world. We were looking at something that might have been protecting, hiding, or holding back things far older than our understanding. The worst part? We had no way of knowing if we had set them free, or simply woken them up. Is the lunar structure humanity's first message from an ancient cosmic intelligence? Or have we just triggered a chain reaction we cannot stop? Tell us what you think, and do not forget to like and subscribe for more.